You'll be playing all over. No, I got it. Good to see you.
My dad
How you doing?
So if I send you checks, I don't care.
I don't know.
Right.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please continue eating and welcome to our fall lunch with the Genius. And thank you for taking time out of your schedules to be here. We thought we would throw a party. We know that John and Neosha Mackey, this is their 52nd wedding anniversary today. We throw a little party. We didn't bring any gifts though, but we thought we'd buy you lunch. Congratulations. Very good. Lots going on campus with the start of the semester. It's only been a few weeks. It seems like it's been several months because there's a lot of great things happening on campus. And to give us an update of the university, please welcome University President Cliff Smart.
Thanks, Brent. It is good to be back. We're in week 3 of the fall semester, and I was visiting with a group of faculty this morning, and they were telling me that there's kind of that old feeling of engagement and life and activity, and buildings are a buzz again. And frankly, we didn't have a lot of that the last 2 years. And so there's a really good feel on campus. We're finishing up some construction projects. We dedicated Camp Peter Hall yesterday. That's the old professional building that has had a tremendous facelift, looks completely different than it did. And on the close to finish on the 2 big projects on the south side of campus, which is the Goodman Amphitheater and the Grand Street Underpass to make that less of a hazard as you come to the Goodman Amphitheater. And we had hoped both of those projects would be done by beginning of semester, but they're a little behind. They should both be done by homecoming. So if you have tickets to the final 10th theater production, which starts Friday, that will be in Craig Hall. The issue there was one of logistics. It was the steel subcontractor in Texas got way behind, was not able to get the steel. Carson Mitchell's been a great partner on this job, switched vendors to a place in Florida. We were able to get the trusses here on time. Unfortunately, they weren't configured correctly, and so additional work had to be done before they could be put in place. You go by now and they are humping it, and all the parts are here, all the things are done, and so it's now just a matter of putting it together. So we'll do a dedication homecoming weekend. The weekend before, we'll do kind of an all come see the have snacks and drinks and see the amphitheater. And so those projects, while not on schedule, are on a new schedule and feel like we're in a good place to getting them done. Everyone always is interested in enrollment in the fall, and so continue to do reasonably well in a challenging time. We are likely to set a new record on census in terms of our graduate enrollment. Many of our international students have returned. We're up 300 to 400 over a year ago as the world gets back to a more normal functioning. A little bit smaller freshman class than usual, but we feel we're in a pretty good place in terms of enrollment and can build on that going forward. And then the other thing I would share is we've got some new faces in our leadership team. If you guys were here for the last luncheon, we introduced Zora Mulligan, who's our executive vice president over here. She's back today. Her partner in crime is John Jasinski. He's our interim provost this year, and so John and Dora are working to lead the academic side, but everything in terms of new initiatives, in terms of enrollment, recruitment, advising, to restructuring, to budget allocation, and they have hit the ground running. And frankly, they have given me a sense of new energy and a really good feel in terms of where we are and where we're going. And so that's, I think, oh, let's talk sports for a minute. So we got a football game tomorrow night. 7 o'clock start tomorrow night. So our fall sports are underway. The Bears beat the Purple Bears down in Conway last weekend. We have UT Martin, which put us out of the playoffs last year, tomorrow night. And we go down to Fayetteville to play the Razorbacks the following weekend. If you're on that trip, there are no tickets to be had now, except on the secondary market. But if you're on that trip, we're doing a great alumni event at Pinnacle Country Club in Rogers on the Friday night before. Not too late to sign up for that, even if it's too late to get tickets to the ball game. Good times ahead on that. Our men and women's soccer teams are underway, both doing well. Volleyball's a little bit of a struggle, again, early in the season as things are kicking off. So that's kind of the highlights of what's happening at the university level. And I'll call up Dean Tammy Yonke to give an overview of her college before we kick off lunch with Gouzie, Genius. So, Tammy.
Thank you, Cliff. The College of Natural and Applied Sciences includes programs in biology, chemistry, biochemistry, computer science, geography, geology, planning, mathematics, physics, astronomy, material science, civil, electrical, mechanical engineering, and hospitality leadership. And no, I can't do that all in one breath. So we have over 130 faculty and just under 40 staff. And with that, we provide coursework for all Missouri State students in mathematics and science as part of the general education program. And we also serve nearly 2,000 students who major in the programs that I just noted. The college is currently housed kind of all over campus. So we're in Kemper Hall, Temple Hall, King Street Annex, Pummel Hall, Cheek Hall, and the Plaster Center for Free Enterprise downtown. The college underwent a master planning study, which was completed in 2019, to determine the spaces that faculty and students needed as we look to the future. And the biggest need was to pull all of our biology, chemistry, biochemistry, geography, geology, and planning students and faculty back into Temple Hall, which was built in 1970. Now, over the last 50 years, we outgrew Temple Hall. We converted almost all the classrooms into research labs. And then we invaded King Street Annex and Kemper Hall with some of the labs that we needed. The really, really good news is that we're going to break ground on a 77,000 square foot addition to Temple Hall that will transform STEM education at Missouri State University. And that groundbreaking will happen on December 16th this year. Never dreamed that this was, never dreamed that this was going to be possible. And it all comes with some wonderful, wonderful federal dollars as well as state dollars that are helping us to do that. So upon completion of that new addition in 2024, we will begin to renovate the current building. We'll also move everything from King Street Annex and a couple of labs from Kemper Hall into Temple Hall. This addition and renovation project will provide the space needed for transformational teaching and research labs for the students in the College of Natural and Applied Sciences. And I couldn't be more excited. But transformational change is also not possible without outstanding faculty. And today I have the honor of being here with one of our finest, a genius, Dr. Doug Gouzie.
Come on back to the hot seat. There's your mic. So, we're gonna ask a few questions and then we're gonna have people ask a few questions out here. Then we have like 30 or 40 people online that are watching this as well. So you are a professional registered geologist, professor of geology, director of the graduate studies program. Just retired from that. Is that mic on? You're gonna have to turn that mic on there.
There we go.
There we go. Teaches geology, environmental sciences, but sinkholes.
Sinkholes.
We're going to talk sinkholes today on the Mackey's anniversary. So but before we get into that,
The library before the one. Oh,
no,
I won't mention it.
don't mention that one. So how many times in a day do people butcher your last name?
There's fewer telemarketers now, so I think fewer of us. It's a great way to screen them out.
So tell us about your family history and
Okay.
where you came from.
So my last name is Gouzie. It looks like Gouzie, but it was French Canadian, had sort of an accent over the end. It's sort of an interesting. I think David Hall was a first gen student over the summer. I'm kind of the opposite. My parents met as young college students at the University of Michigan. And I'm lucky that my mom's family goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War, the Sons of the American Revolution or whatever, daughters. And my dad's family, my dad's father, my grandfather that I grew up with, was the first one in his family born in the US. That his oldest siblings were born in France. Middle children in that family were born in Canada. And the story I always understood was that my great grandfather was probably sort of a Canadian fur trader, Quebecian kind of thing. And then they came down into the US. I was born around Detroit, and then most of my childhood, all of my K through 12 education was just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
So how did you get here?
I often wonder that. I migrated from Pennsylvania. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. That's probably the other step in there. So with 2 parents who both met in college, and I was recently reminded my dad, I think we all hope none of our students today have to deal with this. My dad would talk in his later years about coming down from the frat house on a Sunday morning because other people were yelling and screaming downstairs and listening to the radio because they were screaming because of Pearl Harbor. And he went and signed up. Everybody in the frat house went, and I remember him saying there was no recruiting station in Ann Arbor at the time. They all drove down in the 3 cars that they all had to Detroit the next morning and signed up. So my dad was a World War II veteran. With parents that saw that value, I ended up just sort of one of 6 kids. My oldest sister went to Michigan. The next oldest sister went to Penn State because we lived in Pittsburgh by then. My brother, who wanted to be the rebel of the family, went to Ohio State, which for 2 U of M alum parents was that was bad. And then after that, the next sister had a problem with the admissions office. Penn State lost her application and would not let her start with her classmates. And she found out that she could still go to University of Kentucky. So she went there. The next sister went to Penn State. And I was looking and saying, okay, I've had 2 sisters at Penn State, a brother at Ohio State. I knew that was a no-no in the family. Michigan didn't appeal to me, it was too cold. And so I loved visiting my sister at Kentucky, beautiful campus. I like basketball. And so I ended up at Kentucky. And that's another good place for sinkholes.
Wow. So
Long story.
yeah, we're gonna get there. But so when you were a kid growing up, I mean, did you get into sinkholes then? I mean,
Not at all. I was, again, we were in a really good suburban part of Pittsburgh. A lot of my classmates in high school, their parents were faculty at University of Pittsburgh. And so the school system had very good advanced science. I was an AP science kid. And, excuse me, oddly enough, the school, the AP Science was actually all geared towards making us all nuclear power plant engineers. Because nuclear power was fairly new back then, I'm that old. And they taught us that in AP Science, but we got into environmental things. Those were the days, some of us may remember, there were a couple of rivers. There's a famous one in Ohio that caught on fire twice. And so my dad was an accountant, my mom was a librarian, they were very practical people. I learned fairly quickly that I should probably be practical, and I got interested in water. It's fascinating stuff. And the water is what brought me to caves and sinkholes, because water dissolves rock to make the caves, makes the sinkholes, and I'm fascinated by how water can dissolve almost anything.
So did your siblings, what were, their interests?
3 of my sisters were, thank you.
Got you some vodka right there.
There you go. Very good. With water. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Water's a great thing, dissolves out.
Good time.
3 of my sisters are teachers, so they all had master's degree in, teaching, 1 junior high school, 2 elementary ed. And then my dad was an accountant for Rockwell International, which built a lot of the lunar module, a lot of the space stuff, and that was when he worked with them. And my brother was a stockbroker. So
It's pretty
about
diverse.
half of my family is financial bankers and the other half is teachers, and somehow I'm the science guy.
So when you were a kid, did you say, hey, that's what I want to do when I grow up? Or did you have some other options that you said, man, I really want to do this?
I had a lot of options, and like I think a lot of young people, I just kept looking around trying to figure out what I really liked, and science became a thing I was good at and I liked. I tell some of my students I'm very good at math, which also makes science easier. But I watched my dad, who was an accountant, and he would come home, bring work home in his briefcase sometimes, and a few of us in here can laugh about this. He would have those green paper spreadsheets taped together that folded out all the way across the dining room table after dinner. And would, what we do in a click of the button on Excel, he would do all night. And, and that was the corporate books for a big company. And I thought, I have no desire to ever do that. God rest his soul. I'm glad he enjoyed it.
You'd rather be outside.
Oddly enough, not really.
Really?
I got into it from the lab side, and I teach last night I taught until 10 with a caving class, and they all think you love caving, and I think no, I got into it because the way to collect the water and sample it before it changes is right as it drips into the cave. And my advisor, when I was in college, pointed that out to me. He said, well, if you want to get really good data, you're gonna have to crawl way back in there and collect that drop of water as it falls into the cave. And I thought, I'd crawl back in there. I was a suburban kid. I grew up driving to the mall. I had never been camping before college in my life.
Really?
So yeah. So but now I love it. Yeah, I've learned to really enjoy it.
So you went to Kentucky, and then tell us your degrees there. You got your
I
doctorate.
did my bachelor's there and actually ended up going back and staying there for my doctorate.
So then did you decide, hey, this is what I want to teach?
I did. When I graduated, which was a long time ago, as I look back, I got a job. My first faculty job, I was a professor at Emory University down in Atlanta, popularly known there as Coca-Cola U, because the whole family that owns the Coke formula is their biggest donor. And I went there because they were interested in water and public health, and they have a big medical complex there, and they're right next to the CDC. So I went there with those interests, and people kept saying, yeah, but you know about the caves in Kentucky, could you study how the water dissolves that rock? And that's how I got into it.
So then how did you get here, though, to Missouri State?
There's a lot of jobs in between. I left, okay, so I left teaching. I went to private environmental consulting for about 4 years. Did a lot of expert witnessing and started realizing my license is on the line, and I'm saving the company from some lawsuits by running around where younger, less trained people were right out of school doing projects and maybe not being as careful as they should. And I decided that there's a limit on how much of that I want to do. And one of my colleagues at the time in a professionalist group like this said, "We should come work with us over at the CDC." And so I joined the CDC, did 6.5 years there. It was a great thing. Took essentially a sabbatical year. They encouraged that, and then right at the last minute, they had a change of presidency and they canceled all those, but I was already committed. So I went and worked at camp for high school kids for a year. That turned out to be in the National Forest by Silver Springs in Florida and several other large springs. So apparently I was still in the right thing. And after that year, I went back, worked for the state of Arizona. I had to move west. My parents' health needed several of us to kind of be a little closer to them. And worked for the state of Arizona for 9 months while someone was on an extended maternity leave, and then took a job with the EPA for the state of California over on the coast, which was the toughest job I ever had. As I explained to people, my district was from the north shore of Monterey Bay, Santa Cruz, down to the Santa Barbara Ventura County line, from the coastal mountains to 3 miles out in the ocean. That was my district.
That's a great office.
It was a tough place to work.
Yeah.
And I was working there, but a friend of mine was a professor of geology at Fayetteville. And I was actually looking at jobs back in Florida because I enjoyed living there. And the ad for the job here was right next to the job in Florida on a job board.
That makes sense.
And so I looked at it and I thought, okay, it's a good place for caves and sinkholes. Emailed my friend in Fayetteville and he said, "You'd be about 2 hours up the road from me. We could do several projects together." He's now retired, but yeah, I took the job because of him.
So you knew at that time that this is sinkhole heaven.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
So what is it about sinkholes that just really trips your trigger? I mean, we're all curious about this.
It really is the caves that trip my trigger.
So not the sinkholes.
And
Okay.
it's the fact that the water, the rock around here dissolves so much easier than most other types of rock. You go over to southeast Missouri to the St. Francis Mountains, you get all the Missouri red granite that Carrington Hall Foundation is made from. Granites they dissolve in millions of years. Limestone, you can do it in a couple hundred years. So it's just a different scale, which will sound strange to people, but kind of like Cliff, I like the action. This is, as far as geologists go, something that happens in a couple hundred years, that's a blink of an eye. You can call me a turtle if you want.
So of all the United States, I mean, and I guess Missouri's known as the cave state, but I mean, is there anything close to what we got in Missouri?
Yeah, this kind of rock is actually about 22% of the rocks worldwide and about 21% of the US. The big areas are Florida. Almost all of the Florida Peninsula is limestone. That's why you hear so many sinkholes down there, swallow people in their homes. Central Tennessee, Nashville area, up and Knoxville, up to Kentucky, from Lexington over to Western Kentucky Bowling Green is a big karst area. Austin, Texas gets all their water from that. They have a big spring that surfaces in the middle of town. But yeah, these are the Ozarks, both in Arkansas and Missouri, are probably one of the largest areas in the country for this.
So if you weren't doing this, if you didn't go down this path, of growing up and then high school, college, what was another path for you?
That's a good question. Probably like the year I took off and worked at the camp for high school kids, I'd probably be like a youth minister or something like that, which I would be nowhere near retirement because I don't get paid as well.
So
Although Cliff could give us a raise this year.
yeah, we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
So you've been in the media a lot. I mean, you've been on the Weather Channel.
Yes.
You've been quoted in national publications and newspapers, but you're the genius, the expert on sinkholes. And so how did that all come about? But you get a lot of attention from the media side on that particular subject, and you've done a lot of studies in Missouri on that.
Yeah, I have. I think everyone gets a lot of attention. It's a small community. I mean, I think in Missouri, there are somewhere around 16,000 licensed geologists, I believe. And so, but a lot of those are specializing in groundwater pollution or in foundations for geotechnical bridges and skyscrapers. There's probably a dozen or so that do kind of the sinkhole and cave systems scientifically. Like there's lots of cavers because Missouri is the cave state, and they provide great helpful data. Beyond that, I think there's a little bit of honestly, I think what I do here, every year I've been here, I think I have taught an intro level. I this morning right before here, I taught from 10 to 11. The intro gen ed that Tammy mentioned has a lot of students in there, and it's wonderful. I get a chance to explain science to people at a normal thing. And then I teach our senior majors class, and I've spent year after year harping on them. Someone told me this at alumni get-togethers, that they need to stop talking science. That we need to help people communication is about communicating in a language that we all understand. And I think that's maybe where I get on the media is they like the way I communicate.
So what did you do on the Weather Channel? Was that on sinkholes?
Yeah, that was, it was over repeated, I'll take that. Someone had, once you've been on a few places in the news, and CBC had me in the news bit too, there are libraries of videotapes. And so I got a call out of the blue after the Corvette Museum from a producer in Hollywood who said, I'm doing a show. We've already sold the series to the Weather Channel, so it's going to be on sinkholes. And can we come interview you? And they said, we're doing half the show on the house in Florida where people may remember a guy disappeared while his brother was in the next room. Swallowed alive, as some people call it. And they said, and the other half will be on the Corvette Museum. We'd like to fly you over there. And I said, well, actually, it's probably faster for me to drive. But so I went over and I got a free tour of the Corvette Museum. But I also already knew a lot about it from some of my classmates still work for the state of Kentucky and do sinkholes over there. So I knew a bit about it.
What's the worst sinkhole in Missouri that you've
the worst sinkhole in Missouri is the one under your house. You are. Yes. Yeah.
Christian County, I'm in Christian County, and that sinkhole,
There's plenty of those. Yeah. I live on the south side of town. About 18 months after I got here was when the house in Nixa got swallowed up.
Yeah.
And
That wasn't mine,
no,
but it was pretty close.
pretty close. I feel for you.
Yeah.
It was a terrible thing because I got called out. Some of the locals knew me already. And as I tell my students, I kind of, I had to do some acting because I had to, and it wasn't acting. I felt horribly sad for the guy who lost his house. And he was right there with the fire and the police while they were asking me what else could be done. And I'm kind of at one point looking at him and, getting as sad puppy dog eyes as I can and say, you have my greatest sympathy. And I'm turning around to the other side, looking at one of my colleagues going, this is great. I'm going to get 3 or 4 publications and I'll get 10 jobs. Because it's not often you can be there right when one happens. And so I got
It's a blast.
It's a blast.
That's good.
But if it'll make you feel any better, every night when I went home for about 6 months after that, whether it was the ductwork in my house creaking as the AC or the heat kicked on, I kept thinking, won't this be ironic? The sinkhole guys is going to be the next house that falls in.
It'll come get you.
It'll get you.
So are there more, is the scientific discovery of sinkholes getting better and better? Or are there just just plenty of sinkholes around? Is there, I mean, do they form later on? What is it?
It's a little bit of both, but it's really much more, there's more webcams everywhere.
Ah,
You know, did we ever have porch pirates before? Yeah, sure. But now that we all have webcams on our house or a doorbell or something, it's you can see it online all the time. It makes the evening news because the media has film to show.
so how can you, this is, I'm not a scientist,
Go
if you
for
can
it.
tell, but prediction of sinkholes? I mean, before you start developments, and I know they do soil testing, that type of thing, but will there be more of sinkholes in certain areas?
I think, yes, that's really the upshot of my research here.
Yeah.
The quick, but probably not real quick, explanation is if you think of a bathtub and you think of filling it with soil and building your house in the middle of the tub, there's a drain under there somewhere. And the drain might be clogged up with all the dirt you put in the tub. But if there's a good drain pipe going out, that drain, every time it rains, the water can wash a little bit of that. And eventually the clog on the drain is going to go away. And all the soil will wash away with it. That's a great way to think about a sinkhole. It's probably there under lots of the rocks. Anyone who's driven, it doesn't matter what highway, Highway 13, I-44, Highway 65, the James River Freeway. You drive around town where they've cut through a hillside and you'll see what we call pinnacles and cutters. You'll see peaks of rock, and then you'll see, sharp points of rock, and then you'll see maybe a grassy area. MoDOT didn't take the rock out of there to put in grass. They had gaps. The rock around here dissolves very irregularly. And so any of us can have a small sinkhole. It's just how big and how often. Now, having said that, the bathtub thing comes into play. I need that drain pipe because without it, the water doesn't eventually, it just sort of sits there and dries up until plant roots, take it up into their leaves. So I need that drain pipe. Well, the drain pipe around here is most of the caves. So for my prediction research, if we can get a better handle on where the caves are, there are areas that probably are a little more prone to the drain pipe draining out and creating a sinkhole.
So this is an uplifting conversation, but should we be all scared?
No. And I say, even though that's my research and we're looking for how best to do that, our ability to predict that, I'd love to be a genius, but our ability to predict that is pretty limited. And so all of us, pretty much from the Missouri River south, are on the same kind of rocks, with the exception of St. Francis Mountains.
So we will expect more sinkholes. I mean, just take the one in Branson at
Top of the rock, yeah.
Were you involved in that at any time?
I got called out the first day by the state. They called me in to consult on some things. Several of their geologists are alums of our program, including the recently retired state geologist. So they have called me in on multiple occasions, and then actually we had some Bass Pro people that wanted us to maybe do some follow-up work, and then Johnny figured out it was faster and easier to use his own construction crews to just dig it out. It's an interesting thing. Yeah, it's all around here. Branson has, there's Marble Cave in Silver Dollar City, there's Talking Rocks, there's caves around here everywhere. The question is, can we predict enough of which ones are actively moving the water away and actively, doing that? Right now, it's pretty easy to just say we're all at about the same risk. And the insurance companies, I don't know that, they would charge us all the same.
So you also study and talk about earthquakes, which those all connect somehow?
Not at all.
Okay. I knew that, but I just wanted to see what you would say.
And I knew you do that. I don't actually really study earthquakes. I've done on the media for that because we have a geophysicist. He's a very good friend of mine, Dr. Kevin Mickus. He's on sabbatical right now, but he does not like doing media interviews.
So you did
So often when they've called, he says, could you do this? And because I explain it at the 100 level to my class. So yes, I can explain it to some of the media people.
Well, then a quick question. Are we gonna have earthquakes here in Missouri in the near future, whatever that means?
Here, no. In Missouri, yes. That's part of it. I live where I left California because I lived through a San Andreas quake that was pretty good. It was a magnitude 6. And there's nothing quite like, it was a day I happened to be home. I had gout. I couldn't get off the couch very much. I had crutches. And I'm sitting home watching TV, and all of a sudden you hear this rumbling, and it's actually like they tell you in some of the textbooks. First, it just sounds like a truck going down the street. Then it sounds like a freight train going down the street. And then it sounds like a freight train coming through your front door. And just about the time that I realized that, the power went out, the chandeliers and all the pictures on my wall were shaking. And I remember vividly looking down, and people still ask me, and it's a material science thing. I could see the ripples in the concrete slab of my living room floor underneath the carpet as the quake waves went through. They don't break up the concrete. They're slow enough and everything moves that way. So you learn to feel for people in California, because it's like, you think that, and I hobbled to the front door and opened it and kind of stood in the door frame for a second to look out, because I thought it was over, and the neighbor across the street who had grown up there said, "Did you feel that? We just had a good quake." So that couldn't have been too far away. It was about 50 miles away.
So New Madrid, you think that one will be pretty active?
There's a really strong debate about that. The short answer is we had a magnitude 4 last year in the boot heel. There will be some things in the boot heel somehow with all that.
Yeah. Let's go back to caves.
Yeah.
So how far have you gone into a cave? Just watch the movie that came out about the kids
like
in
the
Thailand.
descent the Thai kids. Okay, yeah.
Sat there for weeks and weeks, but how far have you gone back, and do you get scared?
Do I get scared?
Yeah.
The scariest part for me at this point, the ones that I really have to crawl in and I barely fit inside, those scare me.
Yeah.
You're
not claustrophobic, are you?
I'm not, but I'll tell you a story about that. But I take this class into caves, and the farthest we've gone in with the class trip is a fairly large cave, and we do half a mile. There's not a lot of caves around there that most of those have paved trails or well-marked trails. But yeah, that's always Cliff will plug his ears, I'm sure. That is always a concern as a professor, because I do go in with either a tour guide from a state or federal agency that owns the property, or someone from a caving club that I'm a member of that manages a cave. So there are 2 of us for safety and rescue issues. But yeah, if a student, I'm very tough with the students on the syllabus, and they know this, they've gotten the word out, that if they're doing too much horseplay, we'll stop the trail and just leave, because if somebody just twists their ankle, the ability to haul someone out of a cave is much tougher. If you have to put them on a backboard or anything and extract them, I'd call David Hall.
Yeah.
Because it needs extra people. But I will say, you mentioned claustrophobic. I don't think I am. I've years ago learned to put the fear out to get the data that I needed. But the second year I was here teaching this course, and my predecessor who passed away before I got here had been teaching this course for 2 or 3 decades. So I meet cavers here who've been caving all across Missouri for 40 years. And they said, "Oh, I took Ken Thompson's class at MSU, SMS, sorry." Yeah. Second year I was doing this, I just thought on a lark, as I was going through my syllabus and catching my breath, I said, "And if you're claustrophobic, please let me know now. This might not be the class for you." 3 kids came up at the next break and said, "Are you serious about that?" I'm like, "Yes." The smallest cave we do in my class, it's an 18-inch tall opening for about 30 feet. So you dive like Superman and you crawl up. It's the last cave we do in the semester. I get to see them go from bigger caves to smaller, get to see who might be claustrophobic. And for most of the students, it's an accomplishment. My caving club runs the cave. They've taken thousands of Boy Scouts and summer K-12 school groups in there. It's right on the border of Christian and Greene County, right down there off Highway 160.
Oh,
It's well hidden.
yeah.
And it's locked. It's got a gate.
We have some pictures. I think, let's put some of those pictures up. So how many are in the caving club that you have?
We don't have a campus club. I joined a local club that has probably 50 members. My class, I have to cap it at 22 because you had a TA and myself as two drivers. That's two 12-seat vans. And it gets pretty difficult to take more than 24 in a cave at a time.
So when you're in the caves, what do you, okay, well, this is not a cave.
Oh, that's
tell
a
us.
family reunion. You asked for some family
Yeah,
pictures.
yeah.
This is actually, that's my parents' 50th anniversary.
Oh,
So
this is in Florida.
that was actually at Disney World, I think. And it is my brother on the far left and then two sisters, my mom, another sister who's actually a Founders Club member, and then myself
Great.
and mom and dad.
Let's go on to the next one, Angie.
Yeah, it's a nice family, but
Yeah, it's a good one. We're all
Yeah,
having
we
souvenir
used to see
photos.
them,
We'll
yeah.
give everybody.
I think a couple of my sisters might be on Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, good. Angie,
Hopefully
can you
there's no
forward the,
I am trying to.
okay. So well, as you do that, let me ask you, let's go back to the cave deal. So
Sure.
what do you do when you get into the caves?
Well, there
you
okay,
go.
there's one in the Grand Canyon and one of me in a cave.
You just pose for pictures in the caves? Is that all you do?
I did that time.
Yeah.
That one I came out of crawling through. That's down in Buffalo River. That was about a three-quarters of a mile crawl to get out of that gate. That's our geophysics professor, Kevin Mickus.
Yeah.
And his wife, Lolita Gutierrez, is also a faculty member in our department, a geochemist.
That's not a cave.
That is on top of a cinder cone volcano in the Mojave Desert. We take a spring break trip every year. A lot of our alumni support that. And that was, we climbed that cinder cone volcano. It's about a 3-mile loop, 400 feet up. And it's a great trip. We take geologists all across the country on spring break to show them rocks that are different from all the limestone in Missouri, because that makes them better geologists. And we've had great alumni support of that. We have a whole fund that's the trip fund for that. That's our grad students after a research day last May. And that is a get together with several alums. And Tom Plymate, who's on the Wall of Fame, was our former department chair.
Let's go to the next one.
And that's also in the same trip that climbs the cinder cone in Death Valley is also, it's called the Death Valley to the Pacific Coast trip. We see the San Andreas, it's hard to tell in that one, but at the very back, you can sort of see the V shape of the rocks. It's like Radiator Springs in the Cars movie. And in fact, that's my dad and I out in Arizona, getting ready to hike somewhere, I think. Or finishing a hike. That is caving. The guy on the left is actually a U.S. Geological Survey scientist who just retired, but was a grad student when I was an undergrad researcher, also at Kentucky. Got me into caving. He was the craziest cave. He would go into places I would never go. The far right is a famous professor up in York who wrote the textbook I used in my class. And the yellow hard hat is actually one of our former students who's now a professor up in Wisconsin, just started this year.
Awesome. And the next picture?
That was at some museum and somebody said, stick your head over there. And then they snapped a photo and told me later that I was trying to get the thing to eat you.
Great photo. Okay, now we're gonna go to lightning round.
Oh, okay.
So you just, whatever comes to mind,
I'll do my best.
favorite vacation spot,
Good question. Probably up in the mountains somewhere.
any mountains,
Pretty much like,
Close enough.
yeah.
hobby besides caving.
I played guitar for a lot of years. I'm rusty on it now. I played in a couple of church bands and
You sing?
sing.
You wanna sing a few songs here?
No.
Okay. Hors d'oeuvres or dessert?
Obviously dessert too often.
Good book or good movie?
Wow. Haven't had much time for either recently.
That counts. It's
Yeah.
lightning round, too late.
Yeah,
Can't
too
think
late.
on it.
I can't think of one.
Winter, summer, spring, or fall?
Fall,
Ooh, favorite sport?
basketball.
Ah, are you better in the morning or in the evening?
Oh, I'm a late night person.
Late night person.
Frightening.
Favorite restaurant, in Springfield?
Ooh. Another tough question. I cook a lot of my own. I like a Santa Maria style tri-tip and I just grill it myself. I love the, thanks for getting when I was on the coast in California, Santa Maria style tri-tip is usually served outside along the coast. You grill it over red oak. It's a great beef. You slice it, you serve it with garlic bread, salad, and that's it. Maybe some beans.
Wow, good cook, huh?
Good stuff. I'm okay cooking. I'm good at grilling that.
National Geographic or Sports Illustrated?
I grew up on National Geographic and I didn't read too much sports. Play it maybe, but not read it.
You played?
I played a little basketball, but not anything competitive. I was a high school and into college cross country.
Good.
So I can't tell my running by now.
Oh, okay.
My knees are shot. That's about it.
Okay, now let's go out to some questions from Frank. You always have a good question or two.
I'm curious, I've thought about over the years, Big Springs down at Van Buren, wherever it is.
Yep.
Does a thing like that have an impact on caves and sinkholes? That water has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. So the question is Big Spring and the scenic riverways, and frankly, there's several springs out there. And each of them is coming from a cave that is flooded, so we don't get in it very much. There have been a few places where there's a whole new sport of cave diving. If you think I'm crazy crawling into a cave, there are people that strap on the tanks and were willing to go into a cave and hope that they don't jam and wedge themselves with their tanks in the passages, but they will swim through a cave. It started in Florida, obviously, with a lot of the caves there are below the water table. So when you see the springs, we use Round Spring Cave is managed by the park. I haven't seen if they've opened since COVID, but prior to COVID, they would open it every summer for tourists, all for the public. And it's a long cave. It's a wonderful cave. We used it for our class for many years. And it's very large passage. And then if I get the students to understand that at some point, this was full of water feeding a spring like that in the geologic past. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
But what I meant was, does that have a bigger impact on sinkholes occurring where that spring is that huge amount of water flowing?
Okay, so does that have an impact on sinkholes? Usually the sinkholes are when there's no water left. So if you fill a cave with water, the roof actually gets that buoyancy. It's like a pontoon boat. But if you let the water table drop, you pump a lot of water out and the cave goes dry. Our soils around here tend to have clay in it that shrinks up, and the weight of the roof really it's ready to fall in at that point. It's not necessarily ready, but some of them, if it's a big cave, you got a lot of roof weight to get rid of.
Yep, good question.
Kind of along the lines of cave diving, do you go study cenotes like in Mexico?
Cave diving and cenotes. My students always go, can we take a field trip to a blue hole? And every time I look at it, I think there's nothing in this world the water density in a blue hole changes from saltwater to freshwater. And even the people that are really expert at diving those will tell you it's tremendously hazardous because most scuba divers, it's all about getting your buoyancy right so you don't sink or float. And then you change the buoyancy of what you're in. That gets really tricky.
We have a couple questions online. Angie?
We've got a couple online. The first is, why have we completely bypassed the scientific method when it comes to climate change and believe that a universe that is 3.5 billion years old can be affected by 50 years' time, no matter what man does?
Well, there's a question. You got 20 seconds.
There's a lot of pieces in that. I think the short answer is when you were asking, will we see more sinkholes? And I'm going to avoid the finger pointing because I think a lot of our discussions have been wrapped up since documentaries in the early 2000s about it's human made, it's not. As a geologist looking at billions of years of Earth history, we can see hot climates and cold climates for millions of years. And we know that the Earth has a cycle in there, and whether humans are making it worse, I'll let everyone decide for themselves. The issue that we do know is that we can see in there, and I'm not the atmospheric scientist, but there are lots of studies that show, as many of us experienced a week or so ago, rainfall tends to be more intense. As we heat up around the nation, the moisture becomes more, and so when you do have a storm, it comes down in those last Monday, the gully washers kind of a thing. And that ties in for me to sinkholes in that a professor at Purdue several years ago published a paper that I think is pretty good. It says, if I have a long dry period, like a couple of weeks of drought, like we've had much of the summer, the clays in the soil dry out, then I get a big gully washer rain. That's a lot of weight. And it weighs on the soil before it soaks back in, before the clays get sticky again. And that tends to cause more sinkholes open more often right after a big rain.
That's not good. Another question online?
Yes, there's one more online. That first one was from Ray. Ray, thank you for that. Second one's from Gary. What geophysical methods can be used for sinkhole prediction?
So the geophysics professor is a good friend of mine because we've gone into exploring some of the methods. The grad student you saw did a lot of the projects with that. The two that we've seen the most promise with, in Florida, they use ground penetrating radar. It's a radar that shoots into the ground and gets back up. It turns out most of those, as you might guess, things in the field, we operate with battery power. And a ground penetrating radar often looks about like a lawnmower. It's a metal thing, but much like lawnmowers, it has only been in recent years that you can have batteries with enough power to get a very strong signal. In Florida, where the soil is very sandy, they can see much deeper. Around here, all of our GPR units that we tried would see about 10 or 15 feet before they just lost. We wouldn't get any reflected signal back. So we've had not such good success here, but in Florida and other places they do. We use around here electrical resistance, which is sticking electrical probes in the ground. There's a brain box that lights up 2 probes at a time, sends a signal. And any of us, if you ever watch a murder mystery or Perry Mason or whatever, you can think about this. If you're sitting in a bathtub and somebody throws a toaster that's plugged in it, if there's no water in the tub, you're not too worried, other than why are they throwing a toaster at you? If there's water in the tub, you're worried because you're not there anymore. And if we have a cave that's full of air, it does not conduct electricity through the ground very well. But a cave that's full of mud or water conducts electricity extremely well. And so we can, and rock does the same thing, rock that has a lot of water in it, like an aquifer, versus drier rock. So we can see different signals, and the software gives you lovely multicolored things. I should have sent you a slide of it. And we've had pretty good success with that here. But again, we're putting those probes in on the land surface and trying to see at depth, So if your cave is 100 feet below you, our ability to see a 2-foot or 3-foot wide cave that I wouldn't enjoy crawling in anyway is pretty limited, but our ability to see fantastic caverns is pretty good. But people know where fantastic caverns is because they've already figured that one out.
Other questions? Okay.
I've got 2 partially collapsed sinkholes. How do I know, or how could I possibly know whether or not they've stabilized? And should I be walking on them or pulling a bulldozer over the top of them?
2 partially collapsed sinkholes. How do you know if they're stable? Should you walk or pull a bulldozer? The long story short is, I have seen sinkholes. There is a theory out there, and I subscribe to it, that they're a life cycle. Sinkholes are drainages, drainage features. And just like I mentioned the clogged bathtub before, I have seen in Kentucky sinkholes clog up. We get a storm, a winter ice storm, Lots of tree debris goes in. The next time spring rains come, you wash some mud in. And that's pretty much like a clogged toilet. And it's waiting for a plumber's helper, plunger, whatever you call it, to push enough pressure on it to get out. So sometimes those will back up and become a lake or a farm pond. I've seen people buy farm ponds that 5 years later, it finally pushed through and drained out. And the farmers call me and say, my farm pond drained over the weekend. And I say, your farm pond was actually a sinkhole, which they love. I don't know if that's answered your question. The real question is understanding what's underneath it and how far it goes, because if you're down at pretty much the bottom, and most of the sinkholes around here, we talked about the Nixa house, that's probably less than 8 or 10%, or maybe even 5% of the sinkholes that collapse. Most of them are that gradual, gentle, I get a saucer-shaped hole in my backyard. There was another question.
I was just gonna ask, Doug, tell us about one of your alumni that you're really proud of.
There's a lot that I'm proud of.
That's a good answer.
And there should be. I've had good fortune because of this trip. We formed an alumni board right up at the time I got here, and I got dragged into it because I served on my alma mater. And I was thrilled by several of the alums. One's on your foundation board of governors now, Jim Kendall. Jim was one of the first ones to embrace me and just did great things. And he said, I think you'll be surprised by the giving from SNS. And I was. They've given, we have over a $50,000 fund, which is relatively small and modest for us, but that generates several thousand a year to defray the cost of flying to California and getting that valley trip. With that and with our alumni board, every time I go to a conference, I know that was just, it's on my calendar for later this afternoon. A big geologist meeting happens every 3 years in Denver. We have an alumni reunion that I know will draw about 36 alums. And that is, you can't buy that for our students. To go and see successful people from SMS and SMSU and MSU, they're happily employed in the profession.
Great.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, our daughter is actually a working geologist.
Most of them are.
Has a real job, went through the program and did graduate study in West Virginia, which is another mining area, but they correlate to karst geography in many ways. But I'm just wondering, like within this, from here, how many would you say within, say, like a half mile or a half mile, the sinkholes are actually in the city of Springfield that you are aware of?
Oh, okay, you made it easy on me. So the question was, how many sinkholes are in a half mile or a mile area of where we are downtown that I'm aware of? The beauty is not very many. There are some on campus that I didn't even know about. Unbeknownst to me, I ran into one of my predecessor's old reports. He did a dye trace by putting dye in a sinkhole, and technically it may not be campus. I have to be Cliff would know, you might know. It was over where the band building is, just north of the arena. It's a backside area, and there is a grate in the ground there I've noticed that I always thought was just a maintenance mechanical vault at the back of First and Calvary Church, in between there and I think it's Clay Street or whatever. There's just a little block of street there. So there are sinkholes all around. The beauty for me, the ones I don't know about, I get called regularly by citizens who think they have one. And I worked for many years after the Nixa sinkhole with the city stormwater people, and they would go out and check them. They said about half are real and about half were leaking sewer lines that were also siphoning soil out of people's things. The challenge is we didn't really start mapping them in Springfield until about 1995 or 6 or 7. My predecessor, when we got GIS in our department on campus, started having people make maps, and the city adopted. The city had several of our alums in the county, so they started making maps at that point. But prior to that, that's a lot of the city was developed before we really made note of sinkholes. So yes, go Go ahead.
So does the First Calvary Church know about this sinkhole?
Our secret in this room, right?
They know now. No, I assume they do, just because there's a structure there, and that's been my experience. There's one over on the east side of town that MoDOT has put over one of the on and off ramps, or Highway 65, I won't tell you exactly where. They have covered over and built that into the storm drainage, which honestly is the bane of my existence. I understand why. If you think about sinkholes, they're the low spot. So if everything funnels into a sinkhole, if the city wants to renovate or rearrange the way a road goes or a subdivision, they either have to constantly pump the water up out of that valley into somewhere else, or they have to kind of maintain the drainage through there. But that also means it's less accessible for me to do any sampling or monitoring or testing of it, because it's buried within the city stormwater system. And if you think I don't like crawling in small caves, I like crawling in small storm drains even less.
Yeah, no doubt. So Doug, I know we've got to.
I'll stick around here.
Stick around, we're gonna have to sort of like Rotary, we end at 1, but you are a genius, and we're glad you are our genius, and we appreciate your work to Missouri State and to what you do around the country. We appreciate
I
that.
appreciate your work and all the foundation and all the people here that have made SMS such a great place for so many years.
They'll stick around for some more questions, but thank you for being with us on Lunch with the Genius, and we'll be back in November with another genius. So thank you very much. Good day.